Davidson squats.
Woohoo! What up, y'all? It's Ben. I wanted to start a project here that I wish there was a video that I could have gone to help me do this. I'm gonna make a fender, a Swingarm mounted fender for a Harley Davidson XL883. So what we're gonna end up with, now this is the scratch run that I made, is this. So folded edge, nice crown. We're gonna make one with more of a ducktail than this one, shrink edge, and hopefully I come up with something a little nicer than these cutouts here. So yeah, here's the idea. The tools we're gonna need, of course, we're gonna need a shrinker. If you have access to a deep throat shrinker, that'd be cool. A deep shrinker, deep stretcher would be cool, but there's not a whole bunch of stretching in this project. English wheel is helpful, if not a air-powered planishing hammer. So just to get right to it, it's gonna take me a little while to make this video. I've got a lot of traveling off and on for the next couple weeks, so you may see some wardrobe changes, weather changes, lighting changes, a bunch of crazy stuff. But in any event, that's enough for an intro. Let's go ahead and get started here. And the first thing that I have done today is we're gonna go ahead and mark out the template that we're gonna work on the piece. I'm gonna use 16 gauge steel, which is my recommendation. I wouldn't go much below 18 gauge or you start losing strength.
Are you little boy? Yes, you lose them. Are you boy?
I'm just using Home Depot, mild steel, Everbuilt sheet metal plain steel. So the particular piece that we're gonna start off with, go get yourself a, I believe it's a 18-inch by 12-inch, even though it's slightly larger than that. And yeah, so here's kind of what we're ending up with, and let's get rolling. All right, cool. So here's our piece all marked up. Basically, I have, my shrinker only does about 5/8 of a throat, so I don't have a deep shrinker. What I marked off was the edges, which we're gonna hammer over first. And I went ahead and marked off some zones for rolling in the English wheel. Mild crown, slightly heavier crown, and then the most crown. What I also marked off was the edge for my ducktail. One of the things I learned from making the rough one here is that once that crown is in place, you do have a fair amount of stretching, which is cool, but you have inconsistent results for what you're gonna end up with. So like hammered edge like this, if you're cool with that, then just do that. But I'm gonna go ahead and not crown that too much so that I have more play with the hammer later on. And then also, once I do have it in place, I can play a little more with the English wheel as far as the roll is concerned, where it does the transition up. I mean, that's cool. What I got there is cool. But basically just want to give myself a little more flexibility when it comes time there. So in any event, some other things of note. I went ahead and marked my mounting bungs, where we're going to go ahead and weld those on. So this is the mount that goes onto the motorcycle itself. And these are some little brackets we're also currently working on the XL883. So this is the project bike. Might as well get familiar with that. You're going to see that. So the idea is we made these little, arms that come up and then transition over. I played with bending steel, but I didn't like what it looked like, so I'm going to do something a little more ornate. Basically, what's left to do is to slide the fender in. Now keep in mind, like the geometry of the bike is, you see how the tire kind of sits a little closer to this side than this side? That was my original faux pas. I made a fender that sat really tight to the tire, and it wasn't centered on the bike, and it was bothering me. So that's why we're doing it this way, making it a little bit wider. We're gonna end up making some, I'm gonna call it a flange, and then the bungs will be welded to the fender, so we'll drive a screw through the flange into the fender bungs, and that's how it'll mount on this side. And we have kind of a scratch run here of a bracket. So a bracket will mount here to the swing arm, curve up, and then be able to bolt onto the bungs. So we're probably gonna tap this out with some thread so we can drive screws in here. And then same deal, drill somewhere out in here. They'll weld it on bungs. Screw will come in through and mount to those. So that's the idea. And let's get cutting and working. All right, so the piece is trimmed out. I went ahead and just kind of made these little rough cuts on the corners. Since I'm using air shears, it's not the easiest thing to kind of rock in and make smooth curves. One thing I wanted to point out before we move any further is once these things are cut, you're gonna have this sharp edge here. So we're gonna knock it down with a little bit of a flap disc here, just to keep the stuff from screwing our hands up when we're working. Say what's up, Harrison?
Hi.
Yeah, this is Harrison's garage, by the way. All right, the edges are cleaned up. I'm gonna start hammering on this thing. So what we're gonna do is a couple of different things here. What I wanna do is I wanna go ahead and fold over this edge 90 degrees on both sides, all the way through the ducktail. And then what I wanna do is, once the edge is folded down, I'm gonna go ahead and flip the panel over and start beating the crown in and trying to set a little bit of the curve. So on this one, you'll see we got an edge rolled over the side, and then we have a curve that goes this way. All right? So the curve this way is set by shrinking the sides later on and the tucks that populate when we start hammering. The crown comes from the English wheel. So does that make sense? So the curve is set by shrinking on the edges, and the crown is set by the English wheel. So what we're doing is folding the edge, starting to hammer the curve, and we're not worried about this crown yet. Let's go. Folding over our edge. I know it's real rough and wavy. We got these little highs and lows that are super dramatic. And we've also got these hammer strikes here. Now, why I marked out those long lines is because I do have some hammer strikes on the outside, but very little. Slightly more in the number 2 area. Number 3 is very high on hammer strikes. What I'm doing is I'm starting to stretch the metal. The English wheel is going to planish all this out. So I had set the distance on this measurement here for that angle, and the depth, that's my cheap Harbor Freight shrinker. So we're gonna take it in and we're gonna start shrinking down these tucks and making little bites. Once we get the 90 in, we'll start folding it over, creating more tucks, shrinking, a little more tucks shrinking, a little more tucks shrinking, until we have the radius that we want for the fender. All right, here we go. All right, this is one round of stretching. Now you'll see the edges are much flatter. And the corner's starting to form. So the trick to this stuff to me is just take your time. One thing I do want to point out with the methods that I'm using here, there's a lot of marks that my tooling leaves. I don't really care. You'll also notice like the shrinks. You know, they're not perfect. And over time, you know, some of these bites will get deeper. You know, starting off here with 16 gauge steel gives you a little more material to smooth out in the end. So this is going to get painted after all is said and done. The other thing I wanted to point out, the ducktail, slip it in the shrinker jaws just to start rolling that edge over. Which you can see, just rough hammering and then grabbing that tool, my edge is starting to form, which I could hammer to perfection, or just kind of over time here. You know, the finish work will clean that up, but I'm not too concerned at this point because I do need to start making that curve. And as soon as I start pulling this over, you're gonna see some pretty dramatic tucks. You know, it's pretty smooth right now, but I'm gonna go ahead and pull it over so you guys can see a couple tucks. Cool, so this is the part you wanna take your time on, and it's really hard to hold a camera and do it. So basically, like, I can grab the piece in the jaw on one side and then pull the rest of the fender over, and you'll see this rippling start to happen. See that? So that's what I want. These are little tucks. They form spontaneously under pressure. I'm gonna start curving this thing out. I'm not gonna shrink the tucks down yet. I'm just gonna create a tuck, grab the other side, pull it until I have another tuck, grab the other side, pull it till I get another tuck. I'm gonna do it on both sides of here, and then I'm gonna show you. All right, so before I went in, my edge looked like this. Now that I've gone in, gripped it, and started pulling it, I have some tucks forming. Now you might say, oh, this is hard work, pulling this metal and bending it with my body. Yeah, that's 16 gauge. You could drop down to 18.
I should still live.
If you're a little boy.
You're a little boy.
Are you a little boy?
No. Oh, yeah.
Whatever. So now I'm going to shrink up these tucks, and I'll show you that one side is curved and the other is not. So this is very important. This is before I started shrinking and tucking with just folding the edge over. Very little bit of pressure. Now we're going to flip this around. This is just one pass across, folding and shrinking. You see how I'm starting to initiate the curve? Okay, that's very important. If you look at the profile of this now, where I had that big tuck is now a curve because I shrank. So I have a little bit starting here. The majority of it's here. So what I want to do now is I want to grab this with the shrinker just to have a bite. And then I want to pull here since it's flat. Pull here since it's flat. And start making this bow a little more dramatic. Once I have a little bit of bow in there, it's a little bit easier. But you got to kind of work your way down very gently. You don't want to manhandle this thing and end up with, like, you know, a kink in the center, because the shrinker will do that to you. All right, let's keep working at this side. All right, so this is round 2 on the shrinker, and you can see this thing's definitely making a nice bow. Isn't it, Harrison? You see the curve?
Yeah.
You see the radius?
Yeah.
All right, so I didn't touch the first side, but what you guys might want to do at home is do them both at the same time. I just wanted you to see the difference of this is what we started off with. I just turned the piece around here. So the folded edge, and then I grab a bite in the shrinker, bend the metal around to create a tuck, shrink the tuck down, and you end up with this edge. So we've been at this maybe,
Yeah.
you know, I'm stopping to take little videos here, but we've been at this maybe 45 minutes of work, and you can see the fenders coming along nicely. What do you say, dude?
Yeah, that's really
Give me a
nice.
smooch. Give me a smooch. Yeah, there's my smooch. Let me give you a smooch. I got greasy hands. Put some grease on your face, dude. Here, I love you.
It's on you.
Cool, Harrison. Were you making a canoe or a fender?
In the canoe.
You're making a canoe? Hey, good job. Harrison made a canoe. Actually, I made a canoe.
Flying
Which
one.
raises the point that we need to start working on the center of this thing. So you got some shrink on the sides, some shrink on the sides, and we're gonna start working on this hammered area. So first what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get a low crown wheel, and we're gonna planish this thing. Then we're gonna go slightly higher crown wheel and start making that crown show up. And that's gonna also help with this curve.
Yeah.
So if you notice right now, I got this tacoing here. What it's gonna end up doing is a crown that's nice. And since we're not using the rubber band on the English wheel, we're stretching in both directions. So we're stretching this way, and we're stretching that way. All right, you ready, dude?
Yep.
Let's go. All right, we got this thing in the wheel.
Yep.
Nice low crown.
Yep.
You can see in there. Low crown,
Look
low
at-
pressure.
Look what you.
And as we move this back and forward, it's gonna start evening out that crown,
Yep.
and it's gonna start getting rid of these little hammer marks that we made.
Yeah.
So once it smooths out to the crown of that die, we're gonna tighten it down, run it through some more. This takes a while. Be patient with yourself. Once it's smoothed down to that crown, smooth all the way over, we'll see where we're at on our curve. You gonna do this for me?
Yeah.
All right. All right, so we're through about 30 minutes of running this thing through the English wheel for planishing. You can see there's still some lumpy bumpies, but overall the thing's really flattened out. Slight bit of crown. I don't really want crown just yet. So the idea for me at first is to set this curvature here before I do anything else. So it feels pretty close. There's a couple more spots, a couple more shrinks I want to put in. But due to time constraints today, I'm going to call that a day. We'll wrap this up as part 1. The idea was to make one wider. And believe we have done that. All right, so the last thing I want to show, Harrison's going to help me demonstrate. Harrison, come stand on this fender.
Okay.
Okay, we used steel.
Okay, it's cold, right, Daddy?
Now keep in mind, you know, you're trusting your life on this thing. You may have a, you know, some rack you design that mounts right to this fender. You may have a little seat you put on there and you put your old lady on it. You may have a little seat on there that you put Harrison on.
Close the door. Daddy.
Huh?
Daddy, look at the door.
Look at the doors open.
Yeah, have her close the door, Daddy.
Hey Harrison, if that thing was made with aluminum, you'd be bending it. But it's made of steel, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's strong?
Yeah.
All right, give it some jumps. Jump, jump, jump. All right, that's a perfect example, little dude. So if it can hold Harrison, do you think it can hold your backpack while you commute off to work with your precious laptop in it?
Yeah.
You think it can hold your tool bag there while you're on your way to the construction site?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Thanks, buddy. Say bye-bye.